Alright guys, so today we're going to be talking about parts of the ocean floor. There are certain features of the ocean floor that you'll need to know, so add these into your notes. The first, we're going to start at the beach and what would happen, what sections of the ocean you will see as you pass and get farther down into the depths of the ocean. So starting at the beach, you are standing on the continental shelf. This is the space that extends from the shoreline, so as far as the water will go up at like high tide, all the way down to where the seafloor tends to almost drop off. Where I'm sure if you've been to the ocean before, when you're walking, all of a sudden it might feel like the ocean floor just completely drops off from underneath you. You have most likely hit the end of the continental shelf. If you are just in a really if you're in a location with a really long continental shelf, you could just be stopping to the point where you're tall enough to reach the floor. It is shallow and gently sloping most of the time, but the depths of how far it goes down will depend on the coastline. So if you have gone to the beaches in the northwestern parts of the country, so like Seattle, Washington State, Oregon State, San Francisco, Sacramento, those areas, they have really short shelves. You're not going to see a lot of sand there accumulating. It's really just a very steep drop-off point of where that shelf should be. Whereas if you've gone to the Gulf coastlines, like Florida, anywhere like that, you usually have a really long continental shelf, so great for sandy beaches, walking out into the water, more activities for people to do at the beach. If you keep going, you are now on the continental slope. So this is that drop-off point I told you about. So eventually you'll reach that spot where the floor just seems to drop out and starts to really head down towards the depths at the bottom of the ocean floor. So the continental slope, as you can see, it's certainly the largest section of the ocean floor of the journey down to the bottom. It can be steep or gradual. Again, it depends on the coastline of that continent. If you keep going down, you're going to be on the Continental Rise. So the Continental Rise is the last step of that kind of continental margin region of the land connecting to the ocean floor. This is where a lot of the downward slope meets the ocean floor. It's that kind of connecting point. Here, you're usually going to find a lot of loose piles of sediment that has accumulated just from gravity settling there at the bottom. But again, so that Continental Rise is right there connecting the continental landscape to the oceanic crust floor. So now you're actually on the bottom of the ocean floor. Most of it is going to be the Abyssal Plain. This is a very broad and open area covered with thick layers of mud and silt. So this is kind of what we assumed the whole ocean floor to be like before we had discovered the Mid-Atlantic Ridge and all of those mountains and canyons that exist. We always just assumed it was kind of flat nothingness, and that's kind of what the Abyssal Plain is like. Pretty smooth and flat. So again, most of the ocean is the Abyssal Plain. But let's talk about some other interesting features. You've got the trenches. This should be kind of review. Hopefully it is. Trench, you should remember as the long and deep valleys on the ocean floor. They're the deepest parts of the ocean. So you should remember how these were made. Okay, remember when the ocean floor is being destroyed, one gets subducted underneath the other one, and it kind of pulls that region down. Where that's pulling down, that's where you get the trenches made. So the ocean has many, many trenches. Then you have the mid-ocean ridges, where you have, hopefully again you remember, they are long chains of underwater mountains that exist, where you have that divergent boundary where they're pulling apart, moving away from each other, and that magma is coming up. When it's moving away, it kind of folds along the edges and creates these mountain ranges. There's another feature that we've not talked about before that you need to know. It's called a rift valley. The rift valley is the spaces in between those mountain ridges along the mid-ocean ridges. So that space in between that valley, we call it the rift valley. You need to know that. And the last feature that we've not talked about before, they're called seamounts. Seamounts are usually created when volcanic mountains that are rising from the ocean floor, but they don't get above the sea level. So above sea level, you wouldn't even know they existed. Seamounts are always below. And what we think happens to them, again, they are usually around the mid-ocean ridge zone areas. But what we think happened is that they used to be volcanic islands that stopped getting that source of volcanic material, and then just kind of sank beneath sea level from weakening ground. It just kind of sunk down. So the seamounts, as you can see over in this picture, are just kind of littering around the ocean floor. You find them everywhere. So these seamounts, again, this is all beneath the sea level. You would not be able to see this if you were on a boat on the surface. And that's really all you need to know about the features of the ocean floor.